Let's put a few things on the state. We'll start with a search component that filters the displayed articles. Let's create a new component for that. I'm going to call it search bar. And it's a regular React component. And we'll make it return an input element. I'll give it a type search. And let's also put a placeholder, something like enter search term, closing tag. And to render this component, we'll include it in the app in here. So we'll import search bar, and we'll include it in the rendered output in here, search bar. Of course, we can't just return two components like this, so we have two options. In React 16, actually, we can return an array, just like that, instead of just one element. And of course, if we want to return an array, we have to give each element a key attribute. So this is a good option if the rendered output is generated with an array. But for a simple list of component like this case, I'd rather just return a div. So we'll make this component return a div, and we'll make that div include the two components. And we can test that, make sure that search bar renders. And it does. So now we want to type something in here and filter the list as we type. This means after we're done typing, we want to put this search term on the state so that the app component gets to filter the list of articles based on that search term. So in the search bar component, we'll do something like on change, go ahead and handle search. We'll put that as a handle search function on the component instance, and we'll define that handle search function. And basically, I want to first console log the value of the input. Now we have a few options to extract the value of the input as the user type. The first option is to define a ref attribute in here. This ref attribute takes in a function, and this function exposes the input element itself as we type. So we can place something like this dot search input is that input element that the function exposes. And in here, we can access the value the user types with this dot search input dot value. Very simple. Let's actually test that. So hello, and you'll see that we access the value as the user types. The other option, and the more recommended option, is to put the value the user types on the component state itself. So instead of doing a ref attribute in here, we'll define a state property here for the component. And on that state, let's put a search term, which starts as empty string, and we'll control the value of this input element through this new state property. So this dot state dot search term. So this makes the component a controlled one because the value is being controlled by React. But on change, we need to update the state of this search term. This handle search function receives the event itself, and we can do something like this dot set state. Every time the user types, we'll go ahead and set the search term to be the event dot target, which is the input element, dot value. And to access this search term, we can simply read it from the state. So this dot state dot search term. So let's go ahead and test that. Now when we type, not only do we get the value here, but React is also aware of this search term. So if we inspect this search bar component, we'll see that the search term is now managed through the state of the search bar component. So this is a more preferable option to get the input from the user, because this way the search bar component will be aware of the state change that happened in the UI. But now after we type a term just like that, we need to make the app component aware of this search term, because the app component is the one that's going to filter the list of articles. However, instead of filtering the article on every character typed, we should filter it when the user is done typing. So instead of doing a filter on H, we'll do a filter on just hello, which means that we need to debounce the action of making the app component aware of that state. So we can actually test this debouncing feature before we go to the app component. So after we set the state, we want a function that debounce the action of submitting the state to the component. If we want to do something after we set the state, in React, we have to use the second argument for set state, which is a callback that gets invoked after the state operation is done. So the debounce operation should go here. So we can simply use the debounce function from the excellent Lodash library. So we'll import debounce from lodash.debounce, just like that. So when we import it this way, Lodash.debounce, that means that we're not really importing the whole Lodash library, we're just importing the debounce function from the Lodash library. This is a dependency, however, so we want to yarn add Lodash.debounce. So let's define a component function here. Let's call it doSearch. And this function is going to be debounced. So this function is a debounced version. And we'll go ahead and test it with just a console log statement. So console log, and I'm going to read this .state.search term in here. And we'll debounce this after a delay of 300 milliseconds. And inside the set state, we'll just invoke doSearch. So this .doSearch. And we can go ahead and test that. My expectation would be, as I type, this handle search is going to set the state. It's going to invoke a debounce function, which means I'm not going to see the console log statement until I pause for 300 milliseconds. So we can go ahead and test that. I'm going to type in hello. And you can see that only hello was console logged, so not every character I typed. And this works if I hit backspace as well. You'll see an empty string. So we can assume that this component is going to receive the doSearch operation from the app component because the app component needs to be aware of this search term. So we can simply assume that the function name would be also doSearch. So in here, instead of console logging the term, we'll do this.props.doSearch. So the component receives a doSearch function and it will debounce it locally here and call this locally debounce function inside the callback of the setState component. So now in the app component, we'll have to pass a doSearch operation here to the search bar component. And in here, we'll call it locally this .setSearch term. So setSearch term will be a function that receives the search term. So it receives search term. And we can simply just use this .setState and put the search term in here. So now when we type in the local search bar component, it will invoke this function, and this function is going to set the search term on the state of the app component. And now the app component can go ahead and use this search term to filter the list of articles. So we can test that. Basically, my expectation here, as I type a full word and pause for 300 milliseconds, I should see a search term on the state of the app component. So let's go ahead and verify that. And we see a search term on the state of the app component. And if we clear the search term is going to be cleared on the state of the app component. However, in here, we were initially reading the state from the store. And now we're locally changing the state of the app component. So we're going to fix that next. But for the app component to actually use the search term, we should probably also initialize it as an empty string in the store. So we'll go to the store, and in here, the initial data will also set search term to be an empty string. So now in the app component, all we need to do is filter the list of articles according to the search term. So in here, we'll do something like let articles equal this.state.articles. And if there is a search term, we need to filter the list of articles. Now the list of articles here is an object. So there's no built-in filter operation for an object. So if we want to filter it, we have to filter it through an array and convert the array back into object. But the Lodash library has an excellent function that can help us with that. It's called pick_by. So we'll import that. So pick_by from lodash.pick_by. And this is a dependency. So yarn add lodash.pick_by. And using pick_by is really simple. We'll just do articles here equal pick_by. And this pick_by has two arguments. So the first argument is the object that you want to filter. And the second argument is a function. And this function receives both the key and value for every item in the object. And we want to return true if we want to pick that item. So since we want to search for the value, title, and description, we can do something like value.title.match the search term, or value.body.match search term. Of course, I need to read the search term out of the state, so we'll go ahead and destructure both articles and search term from the state object. And now, instead of using this .state.articles in here, we'll use the articles variable, which could be filtered based on the search term. And I think we can test that. So we'll go ahead and do some search. Looks like we have an error. Cannot read property match of undefined. So actually pick by receives the value first and then the key. And we're not really using the key, so we can actually skip that. Let's test now. I'm gonna go ahead and search for better. And looks like it's working. So we now have something on the state. But again, we set the state locally. So now the store is not really aware of this search term. So in the next clip, we'll fix that problem and always read the state from the store and have the store itself aware of any state changes.